Okay, I'm gonna get us started. If anyone else joins later on, they'll just get incorporated in wherever we're at that moment. Happy holidays, everybody. I'm Bob Turner. I don't think I've met any of you in person yet. I've talked to some of you on the phone and over email, so it's good to finally be able to be live together. And let me share my screen here. Um, Second, share that screen there. And then hold on a second. As soon as you can see my slides, let me know. Okay, can you see my slides, Nariel?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. I'm assuming that's yes for everyone. When I go into slide presentation mode like this, I can't see anything else about the meeting. So in terms of like if people are raising their hand or saying yes or no, any of that other stuff, I can hear you, but I can't see. So anyway, welcome to what we call our apprentice training. This is an overview session today. We call it Intro to Officiating. So for the three of you, you're interested in exploring officiating. So what I hope is that at the end of this session, you'll be in a good position to be able to say to yourself, yeah, I want to follow through on that. Or if you're not interested, you can say, now that I heard what you told me, maybe I'll take a pass. Whatever it is, I just want you to feel equipped to make that decision because we'll have a mat training session on Saturday. So for those that continue forward, then we'll hit the mat and we'll go over some training there that would prepare you for the duties of officiating. So what's this agenda for this session? We're going to cover, this is sort of some big picture stuff. So don't worry, we're not going to get into real detail about rules and about officiating stuff, but I'm going to talk to you more about what it means to enter into officiating and what it means to us as a wrestling community. So we'll do some quick introductions. I'll talk to you about the role of the official. Then I'll share with you some of the organizations that you'll need to be familiar with, that you, if you officiate, that you'll interact with or work with on a recurring basis. I'll talk to you about the concept of assigning. So that's when you get assigned to work an event and officiate. So I'll explain how that works. I'll talk to you about the pay. That's an important part. Uh, what the uniform requirements are for people who officiate. We'll talk about the publications, the rules book and the case manual that guide what we do. We won't go into any in-depth study of them, but I want to introduce you to what those publications are and how they're used. We'll talk about some principles for officiating. We'll do a recap, and then that's the end of it. And then between now and the next session on Saturday, there's actually some homework. I'll be able to assign you some video training that you'll be able to complete between now and that session that will help prepare you for some of the most important kind of judgments and decisions you have to make as an official. So let's start with introductions. I'll start and I'll walk through and then we'll go around the horn and everybody can sort of share something about themselves. But when you get your chance, you'll share your name, where you either live and work or go to school, any previous experience you have in the sport, either as a wrestler, a referee, or a coach, or maybe all three. And then why you're interested in officiating. So for me, I'm Bob Turner. This is a picture of me, actually. I was your 1979 AAA state champion at 101 pounds. So I'm that guy with the long hair on the top of the podium. And that was 1979. So I wrestled here locally at Bellarmine Prep High School in Tacoma. And then I moved on to college. And this picture here, I wrestled at the United States Military Academy at West Point. So this is a picture of me in sixth place at the Eastern Intercollegiate Wrestling Association Championships in 1981. The EIWA was our league, and that was our qualifier into the NCAA tournament. I'm over there in sixth place. The reason this isn't the highest I finished at the EIWAs, I competed in the IWAs and placed three times and qualified for the NCAA tournament twice. The top three in our league would go to NCAAs, but I'm really proud of this picture because the guys that are on the top of the podium in my weight class, Flow Wrestling last year did a um, list of the top 100 wrestlers of all time. So not just in any one weight class or whatever, but of all time. So the guy in first place on that podium is Gene Mills from Syracuse University, who was a two-time NCAA champion, four-time All-American, and he was number 87 on that list of all time. So of the millions of wrestlers in the United States that have competed over the years, he was number 87 on that list, and he's the guy actually who basically popularized the high half. So that spiral ride that people like to use and throw a high half, he's the guy that popularized that. He pinned a lot of people with that thing. He was the first guy to be using that move on a national level. The guy in second place there is Bobby Weaver from Lehigh University. He was number 53 on the all-time list. He was a NCAA third place winner, but he was also an Olympic gold medalist in freestyle, and he was on two other Olympic teams as well. So he was number 53 on the all-time list, and then I'm down there number 1,751,000 on the list, I think. But at any rate, I'm proud that I got to stand on the same podium with those two all-time greats that are in the National Wrestling Hall of Fame. Uh, I've been officiating now. This is my 34th season. I've officiated the Matt Classic, the state tournament here in Washington for the probably 15 times now since I've been here in the state of Washington. I started in the state of North Carolina back in 1989 and officiated there 2 years before I moved back here and have been officiating here ever since. Um, I also coached wrestling as a volunteer assistant coach at my alma mater, Bellarmine Prep in Tacoma. And so this is a picture of some of the guys I coached. For 5 years, I was there, and we hadn't put anybody on the award stand at state in like a dozen years prior to that time. But I'm really happy that in the 5 years I was part of the program, we put five people on the podium at the 4A state tournament. So this is a picture of some of the guys on those teams that I got to work with. And then uh, what interests me in officiating? Well, um, I've been since I've been doing it for so long. When I first started a long time ago, I did it because I was interested in being part of the sport again. It was a sport that's very important to me when I was growing up. Gave me the opportunity to compete at the highest levels against the people at the highest levels, and um, I always tell people this story, like, well, I'll tell you later. But anyway, I just entered in because I really wanted to be put back to the sport somehow. And so in my time in officiating over those last 34 years, I've been able to actually contribute into like the national rule book. So there are three rules in the national rule book that I authored. And then there's a publication here called Nine Rules You Thought You Knew about high school wrestling that's sold nationwide now to people who like to officiate. So anyway, I've been in the sport for a long, long time. Basically, from the time I started wrestling until now has been 50 years. So 50 years in the sport, and it's been a great ride. I'm excited that some of you are now coming into this, and I hope that some of you maybe are training people 50 years from now yourself. So, at any rate, let's go around the horn real quick. We'll start with Cooper. Why don't you go first?
All right. Should I turn on my camera too?
Uh, no, that's okay. You don't have to.
Okay. Well, my name is Cooper Phillips. I'm 20 years old, and I used to wrestle myself. And like you, Bob, I want to be back in the sport somehow. So this is the way I can do it, and I think I'll really enjoy it because I do like to watch wrestling, especially other people. So yeah, that's why I want to do it
Excellent.
or become a referee.
All right. How about you, Leslie?
So my name is Leslie, and where I live right now is Federal Way, and I go to Federal Way High School. I'm 18, so right now I'm still in wrestling, and I've been doing this for about 5 years since middle school. And why I'm interested is because I still want to be part of the sport after I graduate, because I know wherever I go, I don't think I'll be able to wrestle for college. But I really enjoy watching wrestling. It's like the only sport I like. So I really want to
Awesome.
stick to it.
That's great. Thanks for sharing that, Leslie. Madison, how about you?
Hi, I'm Madison, and I go to Todd Beamer in Federal Way. I'm also a senior, and I've wrestled since, this is my 7th year wrestling. I'm also currently still doing it, and I also want to officiate because I know, yeah, I'm not gonna go to college for it most likely. So I also just wanted to still be a part of it because I thought about doing coaching, but then I was like, I don't know, it might take up a lot of my time, like my teenage younger years. So I was like, it's a little too much. So I think officiating would be a good option for me.
No, that's great to hear. Because I will tell you, uh, only being a volunteer assistant coach, I wasn't always there 5 days a week or 6 days a week. Actually, when you're a head coach or a paid assistant coach, it's a 6 day a week proposition. It's a lot of hours. It's a heavy commitment, and I'm thankful for people who coach the sport because we need coaches as well. And we all work together, but it is a much easier commitment as an official, and you still get to be right there and see all the great wrestling. So, Madison, I'm right there with you in terms of like the opportunity that it presents without carrying all that commitment. All right, so let's talk about the role of the official here. Like I said, this is really just a big picture session. So, and if you have questions as we go along, feel free to just jump in and speak over me if you need to. Say, hey, Bob, can I ask a question or can I say something? Like, just do that, okay? So, there's four main roles that a referee plays. So the first one is you got to administer the contest. So in your role as the official, um, we need somebody who makes sure that the contest is run according to the rules, that it's fair, the opponents are protected. That's who we are as officials. So we administer the contest. Without officials, then really, if a sport or a contest, not really many people care about it. I always sort of use the example of if you go down to your local high school and you see people playing pickup basketball, and anyone asks the question, "Hey, who won the pickup basketball game yesterday?" Nobody knows, and nobody remembers, and nobody recorded anything because it wasn't really an official contest. But when you have referees and you wear school uniforms and the school pays money for it, etc., like then that's that's something that matters to people. So our role as officials, we administer the contest. In effect, we make that contest real and sustainable. So that's your first role. Second role is that you're responsible for all the rulings and judgments. So somebody has to make those calls. That's what we do in this sport, unlike maybe in sports like sometimes like golf or tennis, where it's sort of on the honor system, and you're going to call whether or not you took a penalty stroke or the ball landed out or something in tennis, but not in this sport. We we have to be the ones to make those calls that say that is a takedown or that was a pin or that happened after the buzzer. Like that's us that has to do that, and that's a responsibility we carry when it comes to making sure the contests, like I said, are fair and that they're contested properly. But that's that's a rule that when you get into this, hopefully you embrace and you don't mind being that person making those rulings and judgments. The better equipped you are, the better you've studied the rules, the more experience you gain, the easier it is for you to carry that responsibility. The third role is you're a role model. And so, as a role model, I say this because we are very noticeable. And so, we have to be very cognizant of that when we're at a school because we're dealing with school age kids and their families and administration and staff and stuff. So we have to be constantly aware. In that little image you see there, you see the red figurine in the middle of all the blue ones. That's kind of like who we are, because we're dressed a certain way. There's a mat in the middle of the gym, and everybody's oriented looking at that mat. And on that mat during a wrestling meet or an individual match, how many people will be on that mat at one time? Who knows how many would be on a mat at any given time during a wrestling match? What's
Two?
the most? Two? Well, there are actually more. There's three. You and the two competitors, right?
Oh
And so,
yeah.
and then oftentimes there's only one person standing on the mat, and that's you when you're the official, because they shake hands and they go off to back to their bench or whatever. And now you're standing there by yourself waiting for the next, set of competitors to come out. But you're very noticeable because everybody's oriented towards that mat and you're out in the middle of it and you're dressed in a referee's uniform. So you are a role model, and you just have to be cognizant of that when I officiate and I do the pre-meet before a dual meet or a double dual meet or a dual meet tournament. And I always will single out the captains and I'll say, who are the captains today? And okay, Federal Way, okay, you, Todd Beamer, you, okay, Decatur, you, okay, I'll do that. And then I'll tell them, I'll say, just a reminder, captains and coaches, of the special role you play in the area of sportsmanship, because they're noticeable. They're the ones everybody should look at as role models on the team. And so we're the same way in being referees. We are role models and we just need to be aware of that. So you carry yourself a certain way, and you got to make sure that you're not doing things that would call into question your integrity, or that people look at you and go, what a goofball. Like, I can't believe this guy's officiating us today. Like, he was screwing around out in the parking lot or whatever. Like, we just have to make sure we know that people are looking at us and we fulfill that role model that we are. The last role is an important one. We're stewards of the sport. So, like I share, and like most of you shared as well, like, we love this sport, we care about it, and we want to pass the sport down to others. So, when I was in middle school and high school, there were people that officiated me and there were people that coached me, like, and they gave the sport to me. And I've done my part over the last 34 years to try to give the sport back to others. And you can do the same thing. This sport needs officials to carry on back to that first role of the administering the contest. When we don't have people serving the role of referee, suddenly everything is kind of unofficial. So we help pass this sport down. And if you love the sport, then you just embrace this role as an important part of all of that, knowing that without referees that we wouldn't have a sport. So those are the four main roles. Just this, again, this is a big picture thing. I want you to understand like what you're entering into. Um, it's a it's a honorable profession. Not that I don't know anybody personally that does wrestling officiating as their primary job. Like, we all sort of do it as our primary extracurricular thing, but it is an important profession, and one that when you get into it and you have good experiences with it, it's very enjoyable. But at the end of the day, it is part of helping this sport to thrive and to continue on. Any questions about any of those things I just shared with you about what the role of the official is? If not, then let me move forward here. All right, so let's talk about some of the organizations you have to be familiar with. The first one I'll start with is the WIAA. So for Cooper's not from here originally, but the WIA is the Washington Interscholastic Activities Association. So that is the organization that oversees all of the sports and activities within the state. So the schools all sort of count on the WIAA to sanction everything. And so they represent all of the schools and they do sanction all the sports and activities. So high school wrestling, high school football, solo and ensemble and band, all-state band, cheer, drill, all that stuff, baseball. The WIA is the one that sanctions all that stuff. Now, the NFHS, that stands for the National Federation of High Schools. So NFHS, this is the governing body over the rules of the sports. So for all the sports that are contested in the high schools that have referees, they create and maintain the rule books for all of them, for all sports. So for basketball, football, wrestling, baseball, all of them. So you'll need to be familiar with who the NFHS is because they're the ruling body when it comes to the publications that we use to officiate the sport. Then there's the Washington Officials Association, the WOA. The Washington Officials Association, they oversee all the officials statewide. So, and then they're our main liaison into the Washington Interscholastic Activities Association. So, one way to think about this is like, if you think about a similar analogy in business, like the auto companies and the auto workers union, the WIA would be like the auto companies, and the WOA would be like the auto workers union. So the WOA represents us who officiate and oversees all of us. The WI is overseeing all the schools who are basically our customers. And then we have to work together because we have to support their events with officials and they have to pay us for what we do. So the two organizations have a different constituencies. The WIA, their main constituents are the schools and the athletes. Our main constituents in the WIA are us, the officials. And then the fourth organization to be aware of is the Pacific Northwest Wrestling Officials Association. So that's us. The PNWA is what we go by. And we provide wrestling officials for basically almost all of King County, everything north of Federal Way, all the way to the Snohomish County border, and even a little beyond the Snohomish County border. We have 4 schools from the Snohomish County that are in our geography, everything from West Seattle all the way up to North Bend, Mount Si High School. All of that is us in PNWA. We are a member organization of the WOA. So the WOA, because they represent all the sports, you can sort of think of a matrix, a grid of this. If you think about individual sports as a column, football, basketball, wrestling, baseball, and then think cutting across those are geographies. So King County, Snohomish County, Pierce County, etc. The intersection of a, a geography with a sport is where individual associations like ours, the PNWA, exist. So we are the officiating body for the sport of wrestling, basically in the King County area. There is an organization called the PNFOA, the Pacific Northwest Football Officials Association. They cover basically all the same schools, except they do it for football. So every one of those intersections of a sport and a geography is covered by one officiating body of some sort. So for us, PNWA, here's what our geography looks like. This is the state of Washington. I've got King County highlighted in red there. And then if I blow that up for you, like I said, everything north of Federal Way in King County, that's what we, the PNWA, provide the officials for. Everything from Federal Way down into Pierce County, that's the Western Washington Wrestling Officials Association. So for Madison and for Leslie, you compete for the Federal Way high schools. You're routinely officiated by people that come from that organization that's based out of Tacoma. We're based out of Seattle, but because you also compete against the schools that are inside of our geography, like you probably go up to places like Kentwood and Tahoma and Kent Lake or whatever, you end up seeing our PNWA officials as well. So we have 102 schools total that we cover, 54 high schools and 48 middle schools. We're the largest wrestling officials association in the state. We cover the most schools. All right, so let me talk to you a little bit about the WA, since that's our governing organization within the state of Washington. They have their website is actually part of a system called the Arbiter system. So the Arbiter system is a online web-based system. And we use Arbiter. I'll explain how we use Arbiter to get our assignments and get paid as officials. But the WA uses it also as sort of their homepage. And so inside of the Arbiter system, there's a homepage for the WA, and they call it the Central Hub. The WA provides labor and industries coverage, insurance coverage to people who officiate any WIA sanctioned events. So if I'm working a dual meet between Tahoma and Kentwood, I'm covered. If I'm off doing something, let's say for some kids clubs or something, then I'm not covered by L&I coverage from WOA because those aren't WIA sanctioned organizations, and that contest isn't sanctioned by them. What labor and industries coverage is for you that are in high school, it's not something you're probably that familiar with. But what happens is in the workplace, not just for officiating, but if you work at Boeing or Microsoft or whatever, um, if you get injured on the job, then the state has labor and industries insurance coverage that will help make you whole in terms of helping pay some of your medical expenses as well as providing income to you while you're unable to work. So the WOA makes sure that we have that L&I coverage for people who officiate. So if they're out there officiating and let's say a couple of 285 pounders land on top of me and put me out of commission for a while, I can't work, then laborers in industry will help supplement my income since I can't work. They'll make sure I'm getting paid because I got injured on the job. Okay. There's another organization that the WA partners with, a national organization called NASO. NASO stands for North America's Sports Officials. So NASO has an insurance policy that is for general liability. So when we officiate, because of the nature of the activity, right? People are involved in a basically hand-to-hand combat with each other. If somebody was to get hurt while we were officiating, the NASO insurance covers us for several $1 million in the event that somebody would say, well, let's sue Bob because Madison slammed Leslie and broke Leslie's, collarbone and shoulder. And we think Bob was negligent in his officiating of that match. And so let's go after Bob and see if we can get some money out of Bob. The NASO insurance is what covers me so that if I'm working in my role as an official, that I don't have to sort of pony up a bunch of money to defend myself in court against somebody that might want to sue me because they're not happy with what happened out on the mat. So that NASO insurance is important, that liability insurance. That way we can officiate with peace of mind. The WA certifies us as officials. So there's a series of things that we have to do on an annual basis to get our certification to make sure we're current on the rules and that we're current on some of the training that has to do with safety items like concussion management. So there's 7 things this year that are part of our certification. They range from innocuous things like getting a background check. They want to make sure that we don't have like, criminals interacting with middle school and high school kids, so they do background checks on us. We got to take clinics from the different organizations, including a rules clinic from the NFHS. There's a diversity module that we complete just so because we serve a very diverse set of people, we have to have some training on that as well. And then there's a rules test that we take every year, and you have to score 70% or higher on the rules in order to pass that part of the certification. So if you do all 7 of these things, then the WOA considers you certified. And if you're certified as an official, then you're eligible to officiate high school level competitions. you can be short of certification and be at a status they call a registered official. And as a registered official, then you can officiate middle school competitions. So you don't have to finish all 7 things just to officiate, say, in spring middle school season. You just have to pass the background check, do the concussion management, and you you can stop short of doing the rules test and rules clinic. And then, as a benefit of being a member of the WOA, your WOA membership gives you a free pass to all the WIA state championship events. So I've used that personally to go to the state football finals, to the basketball tournament at the Tacoma Dome, state track and field, state cheer competition, state all state band, all state choir. So I've gone to a lot of things because of that membership, and so it's a nice little benefit to go and be able to watch some of the other high level state championship events for free. Now, all this carries with it a set of dues. It's $112 annually this year for the dues to pay for all this coverage you get. So it costs $32 for WA dues for whatever sport you're in, and then it costs $80 for the NASO insurance. Now, the good news is that none of that money comes directly out of your pocket. It's not like you write a check or show up with $112 of cash in your hand. What happens is, and I'll explain when we get into how assignments and payment work, but when you get paid, then what they'll do is they'll just withhold the first $112 you earn to pay off those dues. And then beyond that, everything you're earning just goes directly to you. Okay. So that way people don't have to, it minimizes what sort of investment you have to make up front just to officiate. So let me talk to you a little bit about the PNWA. So PNWA, this is the local organization for you in the sport of wrestling if you're officiating, and we're a source of your training and standardization. So this type of training we're doing now, like that's what you get from PNWA. Each association will have their own sort of version or flavor of training, but you know that's where you're going to get your local training, as well as learn some of the standard ways that they want you to operate, so that when we as a group, PNWA officials, that we don't somehow have really wild variances from one official to the next, from one event to the next. PNWA does all the coordination between the schools and the individual officials. So you don't have to worry about figuring out like what their schedules are and, whether or not they can let you whether or not that you're allowed to go to that school or when you're supposed to show up or any of that stuff. The PNWA takes care of all that stuff for you. Okay. So, um, let me share my screen here. When I was in Chicago for 2 years working, and I thought I would try to officiate with them while I was there. And they didn't have the same kind of setup in Illinois as we have here. So instead of an officials association that took care of all the scheduling and the billing and payment and stuff, individual people had to walk around individual schools and basically try to sell yourself to them and get them to sign you basically to a contract and say, "Hey, Bob, yeah, you can come officiate our events here at Elgin High School or at Schaumburg High School or whatever." Like, that was a lot of work. Here, none of that stuff. You don't have to worry about any of it. You're just given assignments and all that stuff's taken care of for you. Like I said, we use the Arbiter tool to do all of our work basically in terms of the assignments and payments. So we assign officials that way. What happens is the schools load up their schedules for the season, and then part of my role is what's called the assigner. So as the assigner, I see all of the events on given days, where they're at, what level, is it varsity, JV, middle school. I see all that stuff. Is it a single duel, a double duel, a tournament? and then I assign officials into the number of slots that they need to cover that event. So, for instance, like a typical middle school dual meet would need one official. Doesn't have to be a varsity official, but a varsity high school tournament that might need a crew of 4 or 5 or 6. It could, depending on how many mats they run. So I have to make sure that there are officials assigned to each of those who are qualified to work at that level. And the tool is how we give those assignments to everybody. So it all works online. It's pretty seamless. Once you have an Arbiter account, all that stuff just comes to you automatically. You can have a mobile version of the app on your phone, or you can just get into it online. You get email reminders from Arbiter that says, "Hey, you have a varsity dual meet at Kent Lake High School on Thursday." Like you might be getting that on Tuesday as a reminder. So Arbiter does a lot of nice things for you when it comes to your schedule, and for me to be able to assign you to things and make sure that all the events that we're supposed to cover are covered. The PNWA also, your local organization is going to decide who's eligible to work in the postseason. So the league/district tournament weekend, and then the regional tournaments that qualify people into state, and then ultimately the MAT Classic, which is our state tournament. The PNWA has a say into who gets to have the chance to work those events, and it's uh, generally in every association there's a way that they try to determine who are the most qualified and top ranked officials to be able to work those events. The PNWA is a place where you get professional support and fellowship as well. Like some of the great friends I have in life are people I've been officiating with for decades now. So I have a lot of fun just interacting with all of our colleagues and getting to know them on a personal level. But also, like I said, we do the training and standardization. So that professional support that we need in performing our duties as referees, we get that from PNWA as well. So that um, if there's, let's say, a problem the school has with somebody officiating at their event, it's not that we just allow a school to say, well, Bob's a terrible official, he should never work again. The PNWA would step in between that coach and that official to say, hey, coach, can you put in writing what it is? You had a problem, put it in writing, tell us what you experienced. We can take a look at your complaint, we can investigate. If we need to train Bob up better or correct him because he was unprofessional, like we can do that. Or if we've determined that you're just kind of disgruntled because your team lost that night and Bob didn't do anything wrong, like we're not going to punish Bob or do something to Bob when really the issue was you're just not happy. So PNWA is that organization that gives us that professional support. The PNWA carries dues as well. We have some overhead in order to, pay for our phone system and some of the duties that we have to do in terms of the assigner and all the work it takes to assign people to events and make sure that they get paid, etc. But we were waiving those annual dues, so we don't have a lot of overhead, and we only charge $25 per member. But for the last 3 seasons, we've waived those annual dues, and we're going to waive them again this season. So you don't have to worry about those. All right. So that's a quick overview of the PNWA as an organization. So assignments, talk about how people get assignments. Arbiter, like I said, is the tool. And so when people have Arbiter account and they're official, they need to make sure they're logging in and keeping track of what's going on in Arbiter, because when it comes to communications, and I know for all three of you, you're younger, so you're all 20 years old or less. Life is different for you than it was for me as I went through my professional life here. Email isn't your favorite or probably your primary thing you like to use to communicate, but that is the primary way we have to communicate when it comes to wrestling officiating and assignments, because the Arbiter tool will send email reminders, or when I assign somebody to an event, Arbiter will send them an email to alert them of, hey, you have a new assignment. So that's the primary way to communicate. And it it's easiest for me in my role as a signer because I'm assigning hundreds of slots in a season. So probably 600 individual slots I have to assign throughout the course of a season between the months of November and March. And if I had to like reach out to everybody individually all the time, every time I did something, it would be very difficult to run this operation when we're dealing with 50 officials and 102 schools. Like it just would be very hard. So email, the expectation is if you officiate for PNWA, then you got to be monitoring your email. By exception, we can use the phone for texting or phone calls or whatever. And I'll explain how that works. In general, we're going to use the phone as a more rapid form of communication when we have a late breaking event going on where it's like somebody's sick and I need to replace someone this afternoon. And I'm texting Madison saying, Madison, are you available? Could you go up to Mount Rainier High School for 6 o'clock, double duel or whatever. Like, so that's when we're using the phone, or I might be calling them saying, "Hey, Leslie, I need another official up at Highline High School. They've got a girls' event going on. One of the officials got sick. They're starting at 7. Like, so we're doing it for short notice stuff. Um, Inside of the Arbiter tool, you can put blocks so that if you're not available because you're out of town, you're on vacation, you got a work commitment or whatever, or you're taking the SATs that day or whatever, like you can put a block in there so that when I'm trying to schedule people to things, that you won't show up as an option. So if you put a block in there, the system will make sure your name doesn't appear when I'm looking to see who's available to fill this slot at this time at that place. And then if you get an assignment in Arbiter tool, then what you need to do to help me is when you get that, you have a choice to either accept the assignment or decline it. Now, ideally, if you've placed your blocks in there, then I won't assign you to something that you right off the bat go, well, I can't take that because I'm busy or I have to work longer that day or whatever at work. Like ideally that wouldn't happen because you would already have that time blocked and I wouldn't have assigned it to you. But regardless, when you get the assignment, it helps me when you accept it or decline it expeditiously. And when I say expeditiously, I really mean like within 24 hours. So sometimes you're getting assignments weeks in advance of the event. And based off the knowledge you have at that moment, you may say yes or no based off what you know at that moment. And that's okay. I'm fine with that. What is painful for me in my role is when I've got, like 50 some odd slots that I've assigned out to people for a given week. And here we are coming up on Monday of that week. And I still have, 12 of those slots the people haven't said yes or no to yet. And now I'm getting worried because I have to follow up with them individually to go, hey, Cooper, are you going to be able to be there on Tuesday or not? Like you haven't accepted, like, so within 24 hours, it's best to just say yes or no. And then if you need to give back an assignment, so let's say you accept an assignment and then, you figure out, oh, I can't do that now because my boss needs me to work longer, or gee, I'm sick this morning. I got 102-degree fever. Then you just contact me. You won't have the ability in the tool yourself to unassign yourself. So once you've accepted it, you're kind of stuck with it until me as the administrator could take you off of it. So you just contact me and say, Bob, I can't be there this afternoon. I got a 102-degree fever this morning. Or, gee, Bob, when I took this assignment 2 weeks ago, it was okay, but now my boss changed some of our shifts around and I have to work that night. So whatever it is, you just tell me and I'll take you off it. Give me as much lead time as possible so it's easier for me to find a replacement. Sometimes you can't help it. Like I said, if you're sick, you wake up sick this morning and you were supposed to be at a thing this afternoon. Well, you're going to let me know when you wake up, and I only have a few hours to find a replacement. That can't be helped. But, if you know that, next week the work schedule changed and I have to work on Tuesday night instead. So if you know a week in advance and you're telling me, hey, Bob, I can't work next Tuesday night after all, that gives me as much lead time as I need to find somebody to replace. So if it turns out that it's 48 hours or less till the event, that's when, again, we'll use phone, text me or call me to let me know. So the example, and this happens with some regularity every year, like somebody, again, waking up going, I have a cough, like I'm running a fever this morning, Bob. I don't think I can be there this evening. All right, like I'll start scrambling and find somebody to replace you. But that's how that works. And then in the Arbiter system, when you get a schedule, the start time that you'll see on that is this actually the time that the contest is scheduled to start. So for instance, like in the North Puget Sound League, their normal schedule is that they start the JV contest at 6 p.m. They start the varsity contest at 7 p.m. for the boys wrestling. So when I assign somebody, and they only want one official who does both the JV and varsity. So when I assign an official to something in the NPSL, if I am assigning them to Kent Ridge High School, it'll say 6 o'clock start time. Now that's when the contest starts. So the official though needs to be on site and ready to perform their duties in uniform 1 hour prior to a dual meet, because weigh-ins can take place up to 1 hour prior to the start of a dual meet. For tournaments, then it's 2 hours prior to the start of the tournament. That's the time frame that the rules allow for weigh-ins in a bracketed tournament. And then if you're on the crew of a tournament, like I said, you could have 4, 5, 6. I've had as many as 12 people on a tournament crew. Those that don't participate in weigh-in, they're expected to be there 30 minutes prior to the start of the wrestling, so that they can get to the site and participate in the pre-meet meeting with the coaches before the tournament starts. But so when you see your start time in Arbiter, just know that that's when the wrestling starts, and then back it up either 1 hour because if it's a dual meet, or 2 hours for a tournament. Okay. Hold on a second here. Let me. All right. So that's how Arbiter works now. The other thing that goes along with this is that we have a practice in PNWA, which is that we want to contact the school in advance whenever you get an assignment. So when you get an assignment, you go ahead and you call the school or email them no later than the morning of the event, so that you can confirm with them what the schedule is. This is our backstop to make sure that you don't show up at a school and find out, oh, they canceled today's wrestling meet because they're having the winter band concert and they're using the gym for that instead. So when you have an assignment, you reach out to the school. A lot of people, they'll email the school the day before to say, hey, I'm scheduled to be there at Mount Rainier for the double duel. I'm one of your two officials. Here's the schedule I have. Weigh in at 5 o'clock. Wrestling starts at 6 o'clock on 2 mats, 2 rounds of competition. Here's my email address and phone number. Just let me know if that's all correct. If not, just contact me and let me know. So that gives the school the chance to catch anything if it's out of order. And we have things like, this happened 2 weeks ago where the school had asked for two officials because they were going to do a double duel. But then it turned out like the day of the event, one of the schools wasn't going to be there. So instead of running 2 mats, they were only going to run 1 mat. So when the official reached out to say, yeah, two of us will be there at 5 o'clock for weigh-in, that's when the athletic director in that school was able to say, oh, yeah, we're only going to have 1 mat tonight. So we only need one official. So that way we didn't have to send an official out there for no reason. Okay. But that's why we contact the school and confirm what the details are, so that that's our last check and balance in the system, that if something's wrong, if we have the wrong date, the wrong time, the wrong number of officials, whatever, like we're going to catch that and hopefully have time to correct it. Okay. So let's talk about pay. This is an important part. So what I was going to tell you earlier during the intros, I say for now is like when I first started officiating in North Carolina back in 1989, I showed up to a meeting similar to this in Raleigh, North Carolina, at the Triangle Wrestling Association, Wrestling Officials Association. That was our local association in North Carolina in the Raleigh-Durham area, and the guy that was leading the training that day, Tom Evans, he was explaining some stuff, giving us all this overview, and then he told us, he says, when you get to the school, go find the athletic director or the head coach, and they'll give you the check. And so I raised my hand and I said, the check, like, what do you mean? The check? He goes, the check, like, go find them and they'll before you start anything, just get the check from them. And I said, what check? And he said, your paycheck. And I said, oh, we get paid? Like, I didn't know. I thought referees I didn't know referees got paid. Like, I was just gonna officiate because again, I wanted to give back to the sport, and I thought, okay, well, I'll just do this. So it was like a super bonus to find out that we got paid. And I'm glad we do get paid. Like, we invest a lot of time and effort to do what we do. Um, so in our system here, there's an agreement between the WIA and the WOA. They call it the statewide agreement. So just like the auto union and the auto companies come to agreements on contracts on stuff, so it is with our customers in the WIA with us, the officials association. There is a statewide agreement that mandates what the pay rates are for different things. So this table you see here sort of shows you when it comes to dual meets, that's a flat kind of fee per dual meet. And when it comes to tournament, you get paid by the hour. So for the dual meet competitions, high school varsity dual meet, you get paid $71.25 for one of those. JV dual meet, 59.75, and middle school or kids club dual meet, 53.50. Okay. And then there's what we call exhibition fees when you do dual meets, because when the two teams face off against each other, the 14 weight classes, and they battle it out, then beyond that, of course, schools oftentimes have other kids they want to get some matches, so they start saying, okay, now that the dual meet's over and we win 44-40 or whatever, like, can we want to match up this 152 pounder with their 152 pounder? Okay, this 132 pounder with their 138 pounder. Like, so those exhibitions, every time you officiate one of those, you get paid on a per match basis. So if you're a high school varsity official doing exhibition matches, you're getting $5 for every one of those matches they throw at you. $4.25 if you're a JV official, and $3 if you're doing a middle school event. So when you're out there, and this happens a lot in the middle schools because they wrestle and then they have like a million sixth graders who don't get to wrestle varsity, and then they want to match those kids up and get them some wrestling time. Every time two kids walk out there, you're going to get $3 for that match, even if the match lasts like 17 seconds and this kid pins that kid. Uh, Boom, pin. Two more are coming out. Cha-ching, $3 more. Like, it just every time they send two kids out there, you're going to get paid the exhibition fee on top of that. So um, for tournaments, the game fee that you get is on an hourly basis. So for high school varsity, you get paid $30.25 an hour. For JV high school, $25.25 an hour. And then for middle school, $21.25 an hour. And the start time for your hourly clock and the end time, uh, it starts whenever the scheduled start of wrestling is. So let's say a typical Saturday tournament for high school, weigh-ins at 8 o'clock, but wrestling starts at 10 a.m. That's when the start time is for the clock on the hourly rate. So at 10 a.m. you start getting paid. And then the clock ends at the very last match of the tournament. So if they're wrestling, from 106 to 285 or whatever, and the 285-pound final is over, that's when the tournament's over. So let's say the 285 pounders, their match ends at 6:45 p.m. Okay, great. 10 a.m. start, 6:45 p.m. end. And then you're getting paid that hourly rate between those two time frames, okay? On top of your game fee, then you get a travel fee. So this is a flat fee. It's $18. for you to compensate for your travel to and from the site. So it doesn't matter if you get an assignment that's 1 block from your house, or if I send you out to North Bend to Mount Si, you're going to get $18. In general, when I assign people, I'm trying to keep them close to like where they work or live so that they're not traveling all over Kingdom Come. King County, for any of you that Madison and Leslie, you're still in high school, but for anyone that like works or has to, travel around King County during the rush hour, it's quite onerous to get from one place to another. So, like, I have people that live up, close to Everett. I have people that live in Bothell. I have people that live in Bellevue, down in Kent, in Renton. So I I'm not going to send somebody who lives in Kent to go officiate uh, a dual meet up at Shoreline in the north part of Seattle, because it's going to take them forever to travel from Kent up to the north part of Seattle. So in general, wherever they work or live, whatever's most convenient, I'm trying to keep them close. The guy that lives or works in Kent, I'm trying to assign him to stuff in Kent or Renton or whatever. Okay. The person that lives up near Edmonds, okay, they're going to get stuff in Snohomish County and north part of Seattle, maybe over to Bothell. So at any rate, the travel fee, $18 for the day to go to the event. Now, when you do have a contest and you officiate, then in Arbiter, there's a game report that goes along with that assignment. So after you finish the event, then you can go in and record the score of, if it's a dual meet, to say, okay, final score, Tahoma 68, Mount Rainier 12. Okay. You can put that score in there, and then you can also put notes in there that tell me how many exhibition matches you had. Or you can just, sometimes it's just easier for people to email that or text it to me to say, hey, yeah, I was up at Tahoma and I did 8 additional exhibition matches. Because then I have to calculate 8 additional exhibitions at $5 each. That's $40 more you get paid. So instead of 71.25, you're going to get paid $111.25 for the evening. Okay. So you'll file your report, but you'll also send me information that tells you if you had exhibition matches, how many of them there were. And then for tournaments, whoever's the head official of the tournament crew, they will send to me again how many hours the tournament crew worked. So, like in my example, they would say, yes, wrestling was scheduled to start at 10 and we concluded at 6:45. So we had 8 hours and 45 minutes. Okay. Then I can calculate how much everybody's supposed to get paid and get that submitted. Now, if you're assigned to something and the school cancels on you, if they cancel less than 5 hours prior to the start of the contest, you're going to get your full meet fee. So let's say you're assigned to do a dual meet at Evergreen High School, and or double duel at 6 p.m. is the start time of the wrestling. And the school, you've reached out to the school, and the school gets back to you at like 2 in the afternoon and says, "Oh, Bob, like don't bother showing up. We're canceling tonight." That's inside of 5 hours, and the school is going to get charged for a double duel meet, and you're going to get paid for a double duel, and you don't even have to go there that night. So that this is to keep them honest, so they don't jerk us around and get careless with their scheduling. And then, the side effect of that is that we have officials traveling to schools and learning that, oh yeah, we postponed that. The other school had a bunch of kids with COVID, so we're going to wrestle that thing next month instead. Like, if they're doing that kind of stuff and they don't give us at least 5 hours of lead time before they cancel, they're going to get charged for the full fee for that event, and the official is going to get paid for the full fee. Okay. Now, Arbiter's nice because they have a facility in there called Arbiter Pay. And so your game fees, when you work, they get automatically deposited into your Arbiter Pay account within 72 hours of that contest. So if you work a double dual meet on a Tuesday night, then generally by Friday, you're going to have the money for that in your account. So typical double dual meet nowadays, like without any exhibitions, you're gonna be getting paid about $150 for a high school double dual meet. With exhibitions, oftentimes people are making a little over $200 for the night at a double duel. But they do that on a Tuesday night, but Friday that $200 is going to show up in their arbiter pay account. And in arbiter, the arbiter pay is inside of our arbiter system. So you have a profile, you have your own account, and inside of your profile now, money can accumulate in there as you're getting paid for working events. And then what you do is you can transfer that money electronically into whatever bank you have so that it puts it in your checking or savings account, and then you can spend the money. So you get that money within a couple days of working the stuff. So we're getting as close to some real-time payment as we can get. Any questions about pay, how all that works, what the fees are, etc.? If not, like typical person working a full season with both some typical person working just let's say the high school season is going to make probably about $2,000 to $3,000. If they work a bunch of the middle school stuff in the spring as well, um, they might make probably $4,000 in a season, up to 4,000. So it's not an insignificant amount of money that you're going to make. Like so far this wrestling season, I'll just give you sort of my own personal example. We started with some middle school leagues. We have two middle school leagues that compete starting in November, and then we have six middle school leagues that'll compete in the spring after the high school season ends. But so we started having some events in mid-November, and here we are in late December. I've already been paid $2,000 for officiating this season, so we're kind of maybe at the halfway point of the season, and I've already made $2,000 myself personally. So for those of you, this is why I want people, especially like, for Madison, Leslie, I want more of the high school seniors who aren't going to be wrestling beyond their high school years to understand that, hey, whether you're going to school somewhere, Green River Community College, University of Washington, Eastern Washington University, whatever, or you're just working. I have a guy officiating for me this year. He's a apprentice electrician. He just graduated from Tahoma High School in June, so he officiates as well as going through his electrician apprenticeship. Like he's making some decent side money as an 18-year-old person on top of what he gets paid for his job. Or if you're a student, right, you can be earning money towards your tuition or your room and board and stuff by doing this stuff. So it's not an insignificant amount of money you can make doing this officiating. All right, let's talk about uniform requirements. There, so if you for Leslie and Madison, of course, they see us officiating them on a, on a nightly basis, right? But Cooper here in the state of Washington, what we're wearing is this gray shirt with the black pinstripes on it, and it has a sublimated like WA patch on this left chest, as well as an American flag on the left sleeve and a WIA logo on the right sleeve. So that shirt costs like $45. We have to wear that shirt when we do high school events, whether it's JV or varsity. For middle school stuff, we're not required to wear that shirt. So for those of you that will start out by officiating middle school season coming up in the spring in February and March timeframe, we actually have a starter kit of this stuff that I'm going to show you that we give you so you don't have to invest any money in uniform stuff. But if you officiate during the high school season starting in like November of next year, then you'll have to invest in getting one of these shirts. Okay. But the gray pinstripe shirt is the basic jersey we wear, black pants, and if the pants have a black belt, black socks. See a theme here? Black shoes. This year they have a rule change where the shoes can actually have some white trim on them. So like I have a pair of these shoes that you see pictured here. They're Nike Air Monarchs. They're black. You can see even the Nike logo. Swoosh is black on my shoe, but nowadays you can have like white trim in the sole, the white like swoosh mark, Nike logo or whatever. So you can have some white. It doesn't have to be plain black. Or when people start out, they don't have to have black shoes. They can also officiate in their wrestling shoes, whatever color those are. So, um, again, we're trying to make sure that you don't have to sort of like invest very much just to get started. Black whistle and black lanyard. So you can see black is sort of the new black. That's the color. And then the armbands, the green and the red. The green goes on your right side, the red goes on your left side. A disc of some sort, so that when you have to flip the disc to the side choice, you want it to have red on one side, green on the other. You can buy these discs. Like I have one of these Cliff Keen discs like this one. You pictured it's made of like this, cushiony rubber thing. It's flexible. It costs like I don't know. I think I paid like $8 for it or $10 for it. But I've also had people who just take a quarter and they put green paint on one side, red on the other, or whatever. Like it doesn't have to be anything fancy. And then for high school stuff, we have to have a random draw kit. I just use like a deck of cards and I write the weight classes on them. And then I just have the coach, of the visiting team just draw one of those cards out to see which weight class we start the weigh-ins with and what the dual meet will start at. So that's sort of the uniform item. You can get the uniform items. The WA Central Hub does have a store where you can source some of this stuff, or you can buy, other than the shirt, because the shirt is specific to the state of Washington. You can buy any of this other stuff at a sporting goods store. You can buy it online at Amazon, Walmart, whatever. Like you can get this stuff sourced from a lot of different places. But like I said, for those that start out by officiating in the spring season for middle school, we'll provide you a kit that has the gray pinstripe shirt, it has a set of bands, has a disc, has a black whistle and black lanyard. So you're all set other than, if you have your own black pants, that's great. And black socks, you just need to have black socks. And then either your wrestling shoes, or if you have some shoes that are base color black with some white trim on them, that's great too. So that way you don't have to invest money in that stuff. Instead, you're just hopefully making money, not spending money. All right. Let's talk about the publications now. The NFHS, like I said, is the guiding organization for all of the sports nationwide. So the NFHS, there's two main publications that we get every year. First one I'll tell you about is the rules book. So this is a picture of last year's rules book. And the rules book cover and the other manual that I'm going to tell you about, the case manual, they have a different color. They have the same image or picture on them, but they have a different color. So like last year's rules book was green, and then the case manual was blue. That way you can sort of, at an eyeballs glance, tell which publication you're dealing with. So the rules book is published yearly, and this is the definitive source. So this is the Bible when it comes to the sport, because it contains the official rules. Now, this is a picture of what you'll see in the first page you open up in the book. And this is sort of the first place returning officials will go all the time, because what you can see there's it's the list of wrestling rule changes for that season. So the rest of the book is all of the rules, but what this first inside page is telling you is like, okay, here are all the rules that did change for this year. So that's why returning officials, they dive into this first, because if this was a very short list, let's say there's only 2 different things on there, you'd go, oh, good, I already know everything and just need to learn these 2 new changes. Now, in this one, you see there's like a whole page of rule changes and a second page with some more stuff on it, but that just tells you, okay, how much is changing this year. And then there are what they call, on that right-hand page there, you see the wrestling points of emphasis. These aren't changes to the rules. What they are is the NFHS is dealing with people all around the country. And so in the state of Washington, we have about 300 people that officiate sport of wrestling. So if our one state has 300, then imagine states like New York and Pennsylvania, California that are much bigger. There are just thousands upon thousands of people of officiating the sport of wrestling. And so, and the sport's being contested across all the 50 states. So the wrestling points of emphasis, what happens is every year the NFHS is going to publish a few items that they want to emphasize to us. So they're not changes to the rules, but in last year's book, you see there were three things they wanted to highlight, which was sportsmanship, illegal holds, and then uniforms. What's happening is that the NFHS, because they're overseeing all 50 states and the officials working in all 50 states, they're also getting reports and stories across the 50 states, and they're accumulating those things, and then they're seeing patterns or seeing things that are significant enough that they want to address to everyone in the nation. And so some of those things may show up as points of emphasis the next year. So obviously, like last year's rule book, a point of emphasis number one was on sportsmanship. So they must have seen enough sort of things going on in terms of some poor sportsmanship across the nation that motivated them to say, great, when we publish this year's rule book, we are emphasizing to the officials to keep an eye on sportsmanship, watch out for this, that, the other, like that way everybody sort of gets the memo. Okay. Then when you turn the page from there, you see the table of contents. Now, the rules book is not written in a way that's easily digestible by the average person. So you'll see that the table of contents, there are 11 rules. Rule 1, Rule 2, etc. Rule 1, competition. Rule 2, equipment. Rule 3, referees and their duties. So it sort of divides up the sport into different sort of categories, and then inside of those different categories, that's where you'll get into the details of specific rules that cover like what is, like, for instance, competition. In the rule one on competition, it'll tell you things like, yeah, it's a match is, consists of 3 periods or whatever. A dual meet consists of 14 weight classes and 14 matches, right? So this isn't written like a story. Sometimes I get approached by a parent or a fan, that's sort of like curious or disgruntled at the end of one of my events and go, where can I get a rule book? Right? Like they saw me doing something out there they didn't agree with, they didn't like. And they're thinking, give me a rule book so I can find out how Bob was all screwed up and wrong. And I'll explain to them, like, I could get you a rule book, but it isn't gonna, you're not gonna probably be able to make sense of it. It isn't gonna say Johnny goes to the scores table and he takes off his uniform top and he snaps up his headgear, he reports in, he walks out to the center of the mat, he shakes hands, he shoots a double leg, the other guy does a too rough of a crossface. Like, that's not how the rules are structured. They don't read like the sequential story of a match. Instead, they're sectioned up into these different rules you see in the table of contents. And so the average person who's not trying to officiate, they're not going to find the thing that they're looking for, which is, yeah, when that guy was on top and then he broke my kid down and he threw a really hard crossface, like, why didn't you penalize him? Like, if you want to find that, you're gonna have to look in a couple different places to see if there's any rule support for what you're thinking. You're not gonna find some easily understandable way that the information is presented to you that would tell you that, you know, that was too hard of a crossface, or that when he's on top he can't do this, that, or the other. So um, the rule book, you just learn it by reading it. The good thing is all of you wrestled. And so, because you wrestled, 70% of probably what you need to know to officiate the sport, because you already know how the sport works. But what you don't know, that other 30% deal with things that you don't have to deal with as a competitor. You don't really need to know what happens when somebody who's not even wrestling walks across the mat with their straps down, or what to do when the coach is improperly questioned your judgment 3 times in a given day. Like, you don't know what that is, and you never needed to as a competitor, but as an official, you need to know that, because if the coach improperly questions you for the third time on the day, the coach is going to get ejected. That's just the rule. Like, so there's a set of stuff, that 30% that you're not as familiar with, that you'll learn by studying the rules, and then as you officiate, you'll pick all that stuff up. Okay. So, like I said, there's 11 primary rules. The really the one most important rule is Rule 5. That's where the definitions reside. So that's where the thing that tells you what is a takedown, what is a reversal, what is a near fall, like that stuff is defined in Rule 5. So that's sort of the heart of the rule book there. All right. So let's give you an example of how this is broken down. Like I said, we're not going to study the rules here, but I just want you to sort of get an overview, a familiarization of what this rule book looks like and how it's sort of digested and consumed. Okay. So this is Rule 1, competition. So you can see there's a convention that we use when we talk about individual rules. The convention is we use rule number dash section number dash article number. So rule number you can see on here is Rule 1, competition. So that's rule number is 1. Now those black boxes you see, those are the section numbers. So section 1 is match, section 2 dual meet, section 3 tournament. Okay. And then underneath each of those sections, there are articles, ART1, ART2, etc. So for each of those individual sections, there could be one to many articles underneath there. Article 1, 2, 3. You can see in section 2 there, dual meet, Article 2 actually goes down another level, which is under Article 2, A, B, C. Like they can go as deep as like 4 levels, 4 or 5 levels. But the numbering convention you'll use when you talk about a rule is you would say, okay, rule number is 1, section number 2. So rule 1-2 and article number 2. So 1-2-2. And then, like I said, you can go even deeper, like 1-2-2A. So rule 1-2-2B. What it says is competition in dual meet shall be conducted by random draw. Okay. So the thing is, you can break these things down, but that's how we refer to something. So we'd say, yeah, look up rule 1-2-2B. And that's how you find what rule that 1-2-2B is. Okay. So that's just a little convention for you. So if I can you read what this what's on the slide on the page here? Because if you can, I'm going to ask you what, and anybody who can do this, chime in. Just say, I got the answer. What are the first 4 words of Rule 5-17-2? So if you know, if you can read that and you know the answer, unmute yourself and say, I've got the answer, Bob. And then,
I got it. A
okay,
match
go.
begins when the proper wrestler.
Excellent. Well done. Yeah, so see, it's pretty self-explanatory. I don't know if they teach the Dewey Decimal System in libraries anymore. Do they teach that to you guys in school? I'm not sure they do that anymore because you can look up books all sorts of ways, but it was the same kind of thing. Like the Dewey Decimal System was how the books were organized in a library, and you could sort of tell like the different topic areas and where to go find something, on the on the shelves based off a convention. Same with the rules book. So you got it exactly right there, Leslie. Like Rule 5-17-2, a match begins when the proper wrestler reports to the scorers table in dual matches and tournaments, blah, blah, blah. So, so everybody okay with that? Like, you understand the convention? Does that make sense? Just give me a yes.
Yes.
Okay. Because if it's not, I can explain a little bit more. All right. And I picked this rule 5-17-2 because I actually wrote that rule. So that's one of the rules that I put in the rule book. All right. Other things about the rules book. At the back of as you get further into the book, page 60 is about 2/3 of the way through this entire book. That's where those points of emphasis I talked about reside. So, and then next to that is always like the rule changes. So you saw up front sort of a quick sort of notation that said, hey, here's a list of the rules that change. When you get back into the latter portion of the book, then they'll actually have like paragraph or paragraphs explaining what the rule change is, why they made that rule change. Okay. And then there's a section in last year's book from page 64 to 83. So it's like 20 pages of pictures. And the pictures will have in parentheses a reference number to a rule. What the pictures are an illustration of, yeah, when we talk about in rule 4-4-1 or whatever, like the weigh in or the uniform requirement, like here's a picture of what we mean. Like the uniform has to look like this. Or when we're talking about like this illegal hold, a headlock without the arm encircled above the elbow. Like here's a picture that shows you this is illegal. See, the arm is not encircled above the elbow. Like, so the pictures are helpful that way so that everybody says as a frame of reference to know how that rule would look in application in real life. And then there's 2 pages where they have the official signals. And so when we do the training on Saturday, we're going to go over some of the signals, because when you're operating in the role of referee, one of the most important things you have to do is make those signals, because the people who are keeping the score at the table, as well as everybody watching, is looking at your signaling to know that, oh, there's 2 for the takedown. Oh, good. 3 for the near fall. Like they're looking for that stuff. Those signals are in the book. There's a set of official signals, and if you officiate, then I want you to learn the signals that are in the book and ingrain those in your brain and in your muscle memory, and not make up your own signals. There's enough officials around the country who kind of have their own version of certain signals, and that just causes a little bit of confusion with table workers who are keeping score or fans who are watching the sport. There's also a section at the very back, codes of ethics for both the coaches and the wrestling officials. Nobody ever reads those. I've read them. They're kind of informative in terms of the expectations for us as officials or for the coaches. For instance, in the coaches' code of ethics, it literally says coaches are expected to master the contest rules. So that means that your coach is supposed to know the rules. They're not expected to go, oh, I didn't know that was in the rule book, or my kid had no idea that was illegal. Like, your response would be, gee, like, that's too bad. Like, because coach, you're supposed to know that. And that's 1 point for green because your kid, that was illegal what your kid did. You don't go, oh, well, you didn't know. Okay, well, I'm not going to penalize you then. Like, no, that's not how it works. So, anyway, codes of ethics are back there. Competent officials need to know the rules book. Like you can get by pretty far on the 70% you already know, but you're going to get tripped up by the 30% you don't know if you're not studying the rules and trying to learn them and apply them. Because at some point you're gonna, get into a situation that is a ruling dealing with something that is something you only know by studying the rules. So to be competent, you have to know the rules. There's a progression you'll go through of just knowing the rules versus memorizing them, versus as you advance to then understand how the rules, some of them relate to each other, and then understanding what's behind why the rule is in place in the first place. And then the ultimate advancement is that you're able to understand the sport well enough that you could actually design rules because you understand how the sport works. So, but it starts by reading the rule book and getting familiar. Okay. The other main publication is called the case book. Like I said, last year's the rules book was green. The case manual, you can see, was blue. Okay. And this is also published yearly. And there's sort of 2 main sections to it. The first section, last year's book from pages 40 to 70, was the case book. The case book is just a set of situations that they give you. And then they'll give you what the ruling was for each of the situations. What it's intended to do is to illustrate for you how to apply the rules in that specific situation. So by definition, for example, in Rule 5-10 is in the rules book is the definition of escape. Escape occurs when the defensive wrestler achieves a neutral position or there is a loss of control beyond reaction time in bounds, right? That's just what it says. Now, the case manual may have a case that says, red is the offensive wrestler, green is the defensive wrestler. From the starting position at the beginning of round 2, green stands up, turns and faces red locks his hands around the back of green. Is this an escape? And then the ruling will tell you, this is not considered an escape because red still has the hands locked around the back of green, therefore green is not neutral, whatever. So the case manual will illustrate through those situations how those rules get applied in that specific situation. The second part of the book, in last year's book, pages 71 to 94, it's called the Referee's Manual. It's just a manual of things that tell you some of the standardized ways that they want officials across the nation to be operating so that we sort of all look and operate the same similar ways, okay? There's a numbering convention in the case book. So when you talk about cases, instead of when we talked about rules, we said rule number dash section number dash article number. So we had rule 5 dash 17 dash 2. In cases, instead of dash, we use dot. So if we had a case that was referring to rule 5 dash 17 dash 2, the case would be numbered rule 5 dot 17 dot 2. So that's the convention they use. So for instance, in case 7.1.1, the situation given here, I'll read it to you, and then I'll let one of you guess what the ruling should be, okay? So this is an illustration of how the case manual can be used. So 7.1.1, wrestler A lifts the opponent off the mat, and while wrestler B is in the air struggling to get free, wrestler A loses control and B falls to the mat. Would this be considered a slam? So, Cooper, I'm going to call on you. In that situation, would that be considered a slam? A lifts up B, B's squirming around, and A loses hold of him, and B falls down on the mat. Is that considered a slam?
I would say no.
Okay. And so the ruling they give is when you lift your opponent off the mat, you are responsible for a safe return to the mat. If you lose control and wrestler B falls to the mat with unnecessary force, a slam shall be called without hesitation. So your initial inkling was, I don't really think that's a penalty, but what the case manual is telling you is, no, that is a penalty. If that kid falls hard to the mat, then even though it wasn't really A's fault in a sense because B was wiggling around, A's responsible to make sure he gets to the mat. He's the one that lifted him off the mat in the first place. So it's telling you, yep, call a slam without hesitation. So that's how the case manual works. See, it sort of tees up a specific situation for you, tells you what the ruling should be. So the case manual is a good way to sort of train yourself to learn how the rules get applied and see how well because you go through that. Like in your example here, Cooper, you go, oh, I got that wrong. No, well, now you learn, like, okay, I understand the concept, or I see how the rules enforced, and that makes you a better official. So anytime you're wanting to sort of test yourself, you could say, okay, let me read this situation. Red sits out, and green pulls him back, and it's both shoulders within 3 inches of the mat. Is this a near fall? And you go, yeah, that's a near fall because one of the near fall criteria is 2 shoulders within 4 inches of the mat. And the ruling goes, yes, this would be considered near fall because both shoulders are within 4 inches of the mat. So you do that kind of thing, and it affirms what you know. And then if you don't know something, that's where the light turns on. You go, oh, okay, I didn't know that, but now I do. So I've been like officiating volleyball for the last 5 seasons. So that was a new sport to me to officiate. And I had to go through all this process that the three of you are stepping up to potentially now to enter into is like you have to learn these rules. I had to do that in volleyball, and so I was a newbie and I had to study those rules. And I literally last season I went through the case manual for volleyball and I did all of the cases, every single one of them, and I kept track of whether or not I got the answer right or wrong. And I got it right like 74% of the time. Like, and so I thought, okay, well, that's okay, but that I'd rather be like in wrestling, I would expect that I would get it right pretty close to 100% of the time. So the gap between where I am as a volleyball official and where I am as a wrestling official, you can see like in volleyball, I'm only getting it right like 74% of the time. Like I think that's too high of an error rate. Like I need to know the rules better. Okay. So in the case manual, the case book has almost the power of the rules book, but the rules are the higher authority. And the reason is because the case only applies to that specific situation that's presented. The rule applies to 100% of situations. So while we may learn through the case 7.1.1 that pick your opponent up and then he wiggles around and he falls and hits the mat hard, you get penalized for a slam. That's true. There's a bunch of other ways a slam can happen. That's not the only way. We just know that if that's the situation, then we would consider that a slam. Okay. So the case manual, it is good for the specific situation given to illustrate. The problem you have in terms of using that as a like your golden references, the situation you see in an actual wrestling match, if it doesn't match that situation exactly, that's why the case manual isn't your ultimate authority, your rule is. You have to look at what the rule says and apply it to that situation because you might not find that exact situation anywhere in the case manual. And then the referee's manual, like I said, it contains recommendations and tips. They aren't rule. You're not illegal if you don't do exactly what the referee's manual tells you to do in terms of the way you operate. Uh, but the tips are designed to help you be more standardized and to align with how to administer the contest in a sort of a effective and efficient way. So, take it for what it's worth. It's a good resource. But nobody can say, well, gee, if you didn't give your signal the way that the referee's manual said, or if you weren't standing in the exact position, like you're totally wrong. Not true. Like that's not true necessarily. It just means you're not aligned with what the reference manual is telling you to do, but it doesn't mean you're illegitimate or that you are wrong. So, like I said, use the casebook to challenge yourself and validate your knowledge. It's a good way to check that. So when we train on Saturday, I'll give you your rules books. You can take those home with you. Just to officiate the spring middle school, uh, I don't require the same level or expectation of knowledge for a middle school official that I do for the high school season officials. Okay. So just a little bit of take some pressure off you that I don't expect you to consume all these publications from cover to cover and try to be expert in them. If you are, that's great. People who are really serious about this, they do that from the get-go. But if you're not, like the main thing is you start getting into it and you learn a little bit more. And in middle school, the main thing I'm trying to teach you is how to be safe and to be competent enough. Not expert, but competent enough. All right. Last little thing here. Some principles of officiating. 5 principles I want to share with you. Again, this is sort of big picture stuff. First principle is this: you're a servant. So this isn't about you. So what this means is don't have a don't have an ego, too big of an ego about this stuff, okay? Because you're there to serve those kids and those coaches, okay? So if you're trying to make it about you, I suggest you find some other activity, right? Because and making it about you oftentimes shows up because of officials who won't listen to a coach who has something legitimate to say to them, a concern, and they just dismiss it. Or maybe a fellow official is telling them, "Hey, I think you applied that wrong." and they don't listen like that. Those are signs that you're not acting as a servant, but your ego's just a little too big. Okay, so that's the number one thing. Second principle is you have to know the rules. First goal you should have is to apply them consistently. So just try to you know, do your best as you learn slash memorize rules, but when you start applying them, apply them consistently. So try to make sure that if you're slow to award control to someone, be slow on all of them then, I guess. Like, don't be too quick on one and too slow on the other. Like, when you get random, that's when competitors and coaches start to have a little bit of an issue. They don't expect us to be perfect, but they just hope that we're not so random that it's hard for them to understand what we're doing or to make it difficult on their athletes. Third principle here is you have to see something to call it. So this is like a sacrament almost. If you don't see something, you can't call it. Don't imagine that the person was pinned or that you're kind of sure they were locking hands. If they were locking hands, you need to see it. If they're pinned, you need to see their shoulders flat on the mat for 2 seconds. Like, you cannot just think to yourself, well, I think it was, or I'm not sure. If you're not sure, that means you didn't see it. So you have to see something to call it. Don't make up calls. The fourth principle is try to get it right. So sometimes that means admit you were wrong. Like, I was officiating at a regional tournament about 10 years ago, a match where the winner is going to state and the loser's out. So this is a very important match. I have an assistant official on the mat with me. It's one of the rare times that we have two officials on the mat. So I'm on the whistle and I have an assistant. We're in the last 10 seconds of the match, and red leads green 5-4, and they're neutral. And green gets around behind like a standing duck under kind of thing behind red and tries to trip him down, and red sort of stumbles forward and the hand hits the mat, but it comes right back up and pretty quickly, and I'm signaling 2 points for green, and then they go out of bounds and there's like 3 seconds left in the match. And I look over at my assistant and I go, do you agree with that? And he goes, no. And I'm like, oh, I should have checked with him before I signal. I was like, what do you think? He says, he wasn't down on the mat long enough. I wouldn't give a takedown there, Bob. And I thought about it. I go, you're right. Like, I wave off the takedown. Well, of course, like the green coach is like livid. What? Like, no takedown. Didn't have him down long enough or whatever. Like, oh, come on. Like, 3 seconds left on restart. Of course, red easily defends and, wins the match 5-4. But I didn't sit there and look at that and go, well, gee, I would be embarrassed if I, take the points off the board. Like, no, it wasn't about me. Remember, it's about the kids, and red's winning, and red had not surrendered that takedown. Green hadn't earned it. And it would have been bad for me to go, well, instead of admitting I'm wrong and correcting it, I'm just going to let green win the match and he gets to go to state and the other guy doesn't. Like, nope. I'd rather go, you know what? Like, yeah, coach, like, you can be mad at me or whatever. Maybe I was too quick on the call, but I had to make the right call here. So just seek to get it right, even if it means admitting you're wrong, because they will respect you more if you have the integrity to admit you're wrong on something and you correct it than they will if they think you're trying to hide it. Okay, you're not admitting you're wrong. Last principle: use common sense and discretion. Not everything is written in the rule book. Otherwise, the rule book would be like a mile high. So there's a lot of blank space that you have to operate within in officiating actual wrestling that's not written in the text of the books. So use your common sense and discretion when you run into something where you go, I don't know that there's a rule that covers this. So, like, I had a situation where, you know, kids club tournament, on a Saturday where like a parent ran out onto the mat, like in the middle of the wrestling. There isn't something written in the rule book that goes, oh yeah, it's illegal by rule 5-3-7 that a parent cannot run onto the mat and interfere. So, like, That's not written in the rule book, but common sense tells me that, okay, well, obviously, like, we can't have like the kid handicapped because the one kid's mom runs out there and gets in the way. So, just have to sort of use common sense to make a ruling in some place where the rule isn't specific. This kind of stuff happens with, let's say, weigh-ins. Weigh-ins at 5 o'clock. 3 schools are there, 1 school's not. Coach, do you have the other coach, that 4th coach's phone number? No, I don't. Maybe they're having bad traffic, bus broke down. I don't know. Coaches, the other school's not here yet. Do you want to wait 15 minutes, give them a chance to show up? Do you want to weigh in now and then they can weigh in as soon as they arrive? Like, you just use your common sense and fill in the blank and do the right thing. So that's the 5th principle. So just know it's about you, that you're a servant. Try to know the rules and apply them consistently. Got to see something to call it. Make sure you're trying to get it right, even if it means admitting you did something wrong, and then use your common sense and discretion when there isn't something specific to guide you. Okay. So that's sort of the overview. Just, like I said, broad stuff, not trying to teach you how to officiate today, but just trying to give you a sense of what officiating entails, how much you can make doing it, the fact that it's fun, the fact that there's responsibilities to it, like you got to learn some things, you got to be professional when you're out there, but very rewarding thing. But if you enter into it, the reason I do this big picture stuff is I want you to enter into it the right reasons, right? Again, because you're there for the good of the sport, because you're there because you're trying to serve the coaches and kids, and not because you're on some power trip or whatever. Okay. So, any questions about any of that stuff that we just covered? I'm going to take the silence means no. So, if there's no questions about that, then the next thing is we have the mat session on Saturday at Juanita High School. I'm going to send you a email with some links on it to some videos that I want you to watch, so that in preparation for our training on Saturday, that you'll have been able to consume some of these things. What they cover is sort of the most important concepts in the sport of wrestling, which is really the concept of control is the most important concept, because at the heart of all the main scoring decisions, control is one of the most important ingredients. And if you understand how to apply the rule on control, it unlocks the secrets of the universe in officiating. Everybody thinks the hardest calls are control calls of, oh, that tough takedown or reversal or escape or whatever. When you go through the video training I'll give you, it breaks it down very simply, and it becomes a very straightforward exercise to look at action and go yes or no, that's control or not. And what you'll find is that you won't struggle with making a lot of those calls if you will absorb the training I give you and just apply it. It's pretty straightforward stuff. So anyway, I'll send you the links to those training things. I want you to do them in advance of Saturday, because we'll cover some of that at the start. And then what Saturday will consist mostly of is we'll be in the wrestling room, and I'll be showing you how to operate on the mat and administer a contest. Okay. So any last questions about any of that stuff? Saturday, we're meeting at 11 a.m. at Juanita High School in Kirkland. So if you haven't been up there, driving up from Federal Way, for instance, on a Saturday morning at around, if you leave home by 10 a.m. or so, you should be okay. But just check your like traffic app to make sure that there isn't some big slowdown on I-405 or whatever. Like, just double check that like around 9:30 a.m. just to see if the traffic situation's okay, so that you can get there by 11 o'clock. All right. If there aren't any other questions, I hope you all had a great holiday, and I'll look forward to seeing you in person on Saturday. Okay.
Sounds
Bye,
good.
Bob.
Thank you.
See you Saturday.